Some of the kids are not here today, but some of you are here. So I have a challenge for you, okay? So, and they did fantastic last week. They were listening. They were taking notes. That's awesome. Thank you, guys. So I made it a little harder this week because I know you guys are up to it. So here it is. Two questions, okay? And adults, you can play along too if you want. Who is God a father to? Who is God a father to? So that sounds like it could be a trick question, and I'll accept any answer. I mean, both answers, I should say. But the harder one is, what does God want us to do? So who is God a father to, and what does God want us to do? Okay? Who is God a father to, and what does God want us to do? Okay. And they reminded me last week because I forgot that we had the challenge going. So today we're looking again at the Psalms. You know, if my preaching professor, who's resting with the Lord now, so I don't have to worry about it, but he told us very clearly when we were in seminary, you don't preach from the Psalms. The Psalms are for worship. The Psalms are for singing. The Psalms are for the people. You don't preach from them. Preach from everywhere else in the Bible. But sorry, Dr. McCain, I like to preach from the Psalms every now and then. And this one just spoke to me this week, and I'll give you a little better picture of why. But Psalm 68. So Psalm 68, if you're following along in your own Bible, Psalm 68. And at the beginning it says this. You know how there's those little subheadings? It says, for the director of music, period, of David. So we know what that means, right? That means David wrote it. A psalm, period. And then it says a song. A song. So obviously this psalm was meant to be sung. But when you hear it, you might wonder, well, I can't imagine singing that. But in the days of the Hebrews, in the days of the temple, they sang some of these songs, or most of them probably. And this is one of them. So here, and I won't read the whole psalm, it's a very long psalm, but I'll read the first several verses. May God arise. May his enemies be scattered. May his foes flee before him. May you blow them away like smoke, as wax melts before the fire. May the wicked perish before God. But may the righteous be glad and rejoice before God. May they be happy and joyful. Sing to God. Sing in praise of his name. Extol him who rides on the clouds. Rejoice before him. His name is the Lord. A father to the fatherless, a defender of widows, is God in his holy dwelling. God sets the lonely in families. He leads out the prisoners with singing, but the rebellious live in a sun-scorched land. So let me read those last two verses. A father to the fatherless, a defender of widows, is God in his holy dwelling. God sets the lonely in families. He leads out the prisoners with singing, but the rebellious live in a sun-scorched land. So, I've asked you a couple times now, and I might just keep asking, are you glad? Are you still glad? Are you glad to be back in church? What we looked at Psalm 122 a few weeks ago, remember. I was glad when they said, let's go into the house of the Lord. And we're going to look at Psalm 122 again because there's more there. Because the last time we looked at it, we really only looked at the first verse. And there's more there. But there's also more to look at from last Sunday. Because I received some very valuable feedback this week. In the form of a different question, I guess I could say. And by the way, your questions are always welcome. There's nothing that I say here that is ever off limits from questions. Because if you ask a question, I know that you're listening and you're wrestling with it. And, you know, even if you think, Pastor, you got that wrong. You said that wrong. You said something wrong. That's okay. Let's talk about it. You know, I'm always willing and interested in hearing what you think. And certainly wrestling along with you. But the question that was asked to me this week, and it was asked by more than one person, was why was there a picture of George Floyd on our screen last Sunday? Well, one reason, and I probably didn't do this well enough, and so I apologize, but one reason was to mourn him, right? To say, yes, it was terrible what happened to him, and it should never have happened. And there still is racism in the world, and racism is sin just as bad as murder is sin. I don't think God really says, well, this sin's worse than this sin, and so forth. Sin is sin, and racism is sin. And if racism, so to speak, is, what do they call it, institutionalized, well then we've institutionalized sin, which is just wrong. And I don't think I said that well enough, or maybe I said it wrong, or whatever. But the other reason I put that picture up last week was because I weep for the fatherless, especially the fatherless in our nation, but certainly throughout the world. And I'm sure I didn't say that well enough either. But I weep for boys and girls and young girls and young boys and young men and young women who must grow up without their fathers, for whatever reason, you know. And color has nothing to do with it. I really, truly, I don't see color. I don't see racial features. In my book, there's one race, the human race, and God loves everybody the same. But I do see fatherlessness, right? And I guess it just really hits me. And I weep for these kids and these youth, and I invite you to weep for them too. And I invite you to care about that. And I don't know if you care as much as I do, but Psalm 68, and that's why I read it twice, says, God is a father to the fatherless. Now that's good news, right? God is a father to the fatherless. And then it says, God puts those who are lonely, God puts those who are alone, He puts them where? He puts them into families. And we are the family of God, right? And if God puts the lonely into families, what do you think? Which family might God be thinking about? And as God's family together, you know, are there things that we can do to maybe help the situation that this, I think, anyways, it's an epidemic of fatherlessness. I know we're fighting a pandemic, but there's this other epidemic that's affecting America too. And then God brought me to this video, and I don't know how it happened. I guess I heard it on the news first, but then I saw it on the internet as well. And so with Scott's help, I want you to this is an NBC News show, or little segment about it. So take a listen to what they say.
There's good news tonight on this Father's Day about a dad on a mission. He's not just helping his own children, but anyone in need of some special dad advice.
Okay, now there's nothing. There's no spark because that thing's only connected to the red on the other side.
He's the internet's latest sensation.
We're getting close.
A dad dedicated to helping everyone learn basic life lessons.
If your knot's big and you got a short tie, dorky. You don't want to do that, all right?
Lessons Rob Kenny wished he'd had as a kid. His dad left the family when he was a teenager.
I didn't know how to shave, or I didn't know how to tie a tie, and I just picked things up along the way.
Now the front left.
So when COVID and the quarantine hit, he decided to post some videos.
I get a call from my daughter the other day, and
Can you
she
hear
says,
it okay?
Dad, my toilet
Just
won't stop
bring it up a
running."
little more.
Offering simple, practical advice with a purpose.
And then my daughter shared it, and the reception was amazing, and then I had 300 subscribers. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Fast forward 2 months, his online Dad, How Do I YouTube lessons racking up more than 2 million subscribers.
Are you going to teach people how to drive?
Rob's daughter, Christine, now teaching him a thing or two about the power of social media.
I'm blown away with just how kind people have been and in reaching out towards my dad and sharing their stories. Honestly, that they care about my dad, because he's just my dad.
The community growing with viral tweets, TikToks, and shares, a forum for anyone who feels alone. Inspiring messages like these. I'm 42 and lost my father in 2011. Finding this channel today was just the breath of fresh air I needed. And thank you for being everyone's awesome surrogate dad. Even I've been hanging shelves wrong my entire adult life. For the father of two, nicknamed the Internet Dad.
Hey kids, so today I'm going to show you how to set up a tent.
It's proof that, especially now, there's need for compassion,
So it's going to go right over the top like that.
connection, and kindness.
I want everybody and anybody. I don't care if you're young, old, you know, if maybe you've lived into your 50s and you never took the time or were told that you could learn this type of stuff. I thought, you know, I want everybody to be empowered. You know, I don't care what race or sex or age you are. We need each other to support each other. We're supposed to be kind to each other.
I love you. I'm proud of you. God bless you.
Some of Rob's future lessons will include how to use power tools.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out.
So, it's called Dad, How Do I? And it's on the internet, it's on YouTube, and you know, it's really something. I don't know, had anybody ever seen that before or heard about it? It's kind of cool. But you know, it's great, and some of us, I know, Rod, you do a lot of that for your kids, and others of us probably help our kids in various ways. But what about all the other fatherless people out there, right? And he's meeting a need, right? He's doing a good thing. And but it's one thing, what God laid on me this week, it's one thing, and this, you know, it's personal to me too, but for everybody, it's one thing to weep for the fatherless. It's another thing to be the family of God to them, to help in some way, because God is the father to the fatherless, right? And God does put the lonely into families. And so I'm wondering, you know, what is it that we can do, if anything? Let me just move this along here. Because there is a lot of fatherlessness out there. And there's a lot of lonely people out there, whether they have fathers or not. A lot of lonely people. And I don't know much about this guy, Rob Kinney. You know, I've looked up, he's got a tiny little blurb on Wikipedia. I don't know much about him. Is he a Christian? I don't know. But it doesn't seem to matter, because he's doing the Lord's work, right? He's doing something that is really meeting a need. He's got 2.4 million subscribers on YouTube, and that's really powerful. Eden Church, we have 27 subscribers. So here's what I want you to do. Number one is subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you haven't done that, all you do is go to youtube.com and look us up and hit the little red subscribe button. It doesn't ask for email address. It doesn't ask for anything. You don't get any input from it at all. But it helps other people to find our videos that we put up there. What I was told is once you get to 100 subscribers, you can use your name in the address. So it would be youtube.com/Eden Church of the Brethren, which just really helps people. Right now it's all these numbers and letters and things. And, you know, it's okay. And I know a lot of us don't even bother with YouTube. But can we follow Mr. Kenny's lead here in some way? As the church, the family of God. Is there something we can do? Man, this wind is wonderful. I love the wind. And I'm not one to memorize my messages, and you probably picked that up already. But I gotta always adjust in the summertime, because it does blow it away. To heal our world, you know, there's just a lot of hurt out there. There's a lot, we see it all the time, all the crazy stuff that's happening. And what can we do as God's family, as God's people, to try to help fix some of this, offer a different solution, offer a different way, right? What is God calling us to do, right? What is God calling us to do as as God's family. Well, here's what I want you to do with that. And not next week, because I got another message in store for next week. But in a couple weeks, I'm going on vacation. I'm going to take a vacation Sunday. I haven't taken one yet this year. And normally I don't tell you about it. Normally I, believe it or not, and this has always been my practice, I just kind of keep it a secret, you know. You show up on Sunday and you don't see the preacher. Well, you know, because I'm always afraid. I was told when I was in seminary too that, well, because when the cat's away, the mice will play, right? That's what they say. I don't know if that's true. But I never want to give you a reason not to come to church. But this time, I want to give you a very good reason. That's actually the porch at my mom's cottage. My brothers are really great at marketing the cottage. And so I dug this up on the internet. But I want to give you a great reason to be here in 2 weeks. Come next week too, of course. But in 2 weeks, a good friend of mine, Chet Harris, is going to be our guest preacher. And I didn't get him, but Jill did. And he's a retired Methodist pastor. And you will want to hear him because he's a fantastic preacher. He really is. I first heard him, I think it was 37 years ago, when he was the pastor down in Navarre. And we were down at camp, and we would go to different churches on Sunday morning. And so we heard him preach. But for the last almost 30 years, Chet has pastored the Duber Methodist Church on the west side of Canton, kind of right around Altman there. I don't know if you know where that is, Duber Street. I guess the Duber Watch Company used to be there way back before the freeway and all that. But it's a great church. In fact, I think it's where these two ladies spent much of their childhood at Duber Methodist. But it's what they do on Thursdays that I want to tell you about. And it's something that Chet started, and so I've kind of followed it on Facebook for the last number of years. Every Thursday night, the folks in that church, and probably not everybody, I can't imagine it'd be everybody, but they go into the neighborhood. They go into the city, so to speak. They go into their neighborhood. They go into other neighborhoods in Canton. And they just talk to people, right? They just minister to people. They're not there to invite them to church. They're not going to try to get them to do something. They're trying to go and find out what they can do for them, right? Just like Jesus said in Luke 10. Remember Jesus, that's the Good Samaritan. And the lawyer, he says, well, who's my neighbor, right? And he's kind of being flippant about it. But the moral of that story is everybody, right? Everybody's our neighbor. And so these folks, they go into the city every Thursday. And when Chet was there, I think they started at like 10 o'clock at night, and they went all night. Now I looked on their website, I think they start at 6, so it's, probably easier. But they go in and they talk to folks. They talk to their neighbors. They talk to street people. I'm sure they talk to a lot of people that are lonely, people that are fatherless, and all of that. And they just try to be friends with them, right? They pray with them. They take food and water and stuff, and they hand that out. And I'm assuming they still are doing it, even with COVID. They might not be. But they don't let fear control them, right? They don't say, oh, well, we don't know these people. We're not going to go where they are, right? And actually, Duber is kind of, sort of in the inner city, if Canton has an inner city. And so they're right there in the midst of it. And a lot of these people probably don't live in that neighborhood anymore. Some do. But a lot of our churches, people drive into where the church is. And that's probably what happened at Duber too. But they're still committed to their neighborhood. Because God is a father to the fatherless, right? God does put the lonely into families. And I'm sure other churches do it too. And do other things. Think about Mount Pleasant Church of the Brethren. They do a community garden. And they invite the community to come, and everybody can have a plot. You can raise your own food. You can raise food to give to the food bank and all of that. So there's lots of ways to go at it and to do it. But this thing at Duber just has always spoken to me. And so what is God calling us to do? And actually had a whole nother message ready to go for today, but then God just really started working on me, and certain people were asking me questions and suggesting things. And so I think we'll focus on that one question. What is God calling us to do, right? It's one thing to weep. It's one thing to weep for the fatherless or the lonely or the people, anybody that's in any kind of trouble. It's another thing to get involved, to do something, to be a neighbor, to be a friend, to be a minister, a missionary, whatever word you want to use. And you might think, and I can hear you thinking right now, because I think about it too. Here we are. We're just this little country church, right? We're here. We're kind of, my wife says we're kind of in the middle of nowhere. We're not. There's people around here. But yes, there is. But, people aren't going to maybe drive all the way out here from downtown Canton or whatever. But what can we do? What can we do, right? And here we are. We're Eden Church of the Brethren. Well, I'm guessing that David asked that question, right? When David was coming up against Goliath, and nobody would fight Goliath, and little David, he's this little shepherd boy, what can I do, right? What can I do? Well, he figured it out, didn't he? And Daniel, remember Daniel, he's facing the lion's den, right? What can I do? And God showed him what he could do, right? And then in Acts chapter 3, and you might not remember this story, it's a great story, I think. Peter and John, they're going up to the temple. Remember we said you're going up to the temple, and they're going up to the temple. And there's this lame beggar sitting there on the steps of the temple. And this beggar is begging, because that's what beggars do. And so he asked Peter and John for some money, right? And what does Peter tell him? Silver and gold have I none, right? Silver and gold have I none. But what I do have, I give to you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, get up and walk, right? And that beggar was healed right there so that he could, take care of his own needs and so forth. But think about that. Silver and gold have I none. But what I do have, I give. We are kind of a small church, a little country church. We don't have a lot. We don't have a lot of money. We don't have a lot of people. We don't have a big fancy building or anything like that. But you see, God never asks us to give what we don't have, right? He only asks us to do what we can do. He only asks us to give what we can give, whether that be to help the lonely, the fatherless, or the hungry, or whatever. What do we have? What can we do? Not what we don't have. In a big church, Duber's a pretty big church. Big church like that, they can do a lot more than we can. But what can we do? How can we serve, right? Do what we can, brothers and sisters. Give what we can. Help where we can, right? Share what we do have, not what we don't have. Oh, wouldn't it be great if we did have? But we don't. So do what we can do. Love as we are able. Love our neighbors, love our friends, love our families, love strangers, right? Ever since we were on lockdown, I kept thinking, there's a sermon in this word, perfect stranger. A perfect stranger, right? Are we loving the perfect stranger? Are we serving the perfect stranger? Someday maybe I'll preach that. But do what we can, help where we can, love where we can, and in all of these ways, proclaim the kingdom of God and the never-ending love of Jesus Christ.